I'm Scot Horst. I'm Senior Vice President of LEED and Innovation at U.S. Green Building Council. Welcome to the third in our Master Series sessions on LEED equals performance. We're talking about performance in these series because we're really trying to ask ourselves the questions, what are we doing here? What are we trying to accomplish? Are we accomplishing it? Or what are we trying to contribute? What's the difference between accomplishment and contribution? This is going to be a fun series, a fun session actually. The first session we focused on learning and feedback. In the second session we focused on practice and technique. And now in this session we're going to be talking about applause and outcomes. So this is really what it's about, right? It's really about applause and outcomes. Imagine being a musician or a dancer or an architect or anybody who's trying to do fantastic work but you keep it all to yourself. It's rewarding, perhaps, but when it really comes to life is when you share it and when you give it as a gift of something that makes the world a better place. So we're talking about this in the context of LEED because LEED is focusing a lot more on performance, and one of my goals and one of my jobs is to really help us get to a level of performance. So I want to spend, what we're going to be doing is talking a lot about what performance means, and we're going to be talking about how you think about performance. So there are several things about performance that I want you to think. Think that it takes being on the same page. You know, you all have to be doing something similar. We're going to see some examples of this. But being on the same page, learning requirements, learning what are the rules of the road and all trying to work by those same rules. And then it takes playing the notes, but not only playing the notes, doing something great. So now with LEED, we have, almost 50,000 projects. We have 9 billion square feet in the system. We're in 135 countries. We're growing like crazy. People are using the system as a score, as something that they're doing together. But are we using it to really perform? Are we using it to really take us to a new level? So before I introduce my guest, who I'm very excited to be here with, I want you to listen to the Quartet San Francisco, and I want you to watch ODC Dance Company do a piece for you. And I want you to think about them as you're watching them and listening to them in terms of how you do your work and in terms of what it means not only to work in an ensemble, as a group, as a team, but also what does it mean to really express something from your whole being. Enjoy ODC Dance Company and Quartet San Francisco. San Francisco's ODC Dance Company and San Francisco String Quartet. That's awesome, isn't it? I mean, so they learned something, they practiced it, they have technique that made them very impressive, and then they performed it and we clapped. But we didn't clap, we didn't applaud simply because they played the notes, did we? It's not like just about meeting the requirements, right? It's not about just doing the system and trying to get that done. I want to do, before my guest comes on, I want to do one audible, not visualization, but it sort of is a visualization of some of these principles. So Jeremy and Quartet San Francisco, what does it sound like if you're playing the same music, you're using the same score, but you aren't on the same page? Isn't that beautiful? So imagine if we're all creating different ways of trying to do the same thing, always coming up with something new, but not with sort of a foundation of the same piece of music that we're playing from or the same score. That's what I believe LEED represents, is this document that we all follow. Now, what happens if you play the same piece, but you play by different rules? So you don't meet the requirements. Let's say you've got rules in music which include rhythm, or they include the key that you're playing in. What if you play the same piece and you're on the same page, but you play by different rules? This is what Charles Ives used to actually write, precisely what he used to write. But it's not really what we want to try to accomplish if we're creating the world that we want. Now, what if you're meeting all the requirements, you're playing by the same rules, you're playing the same piece, but you're just meeting the requirements. You aren't really putting anything into it. You're just getting certified. Just certified. Perfect. Maybe even gold. So, okay, now what if you play the same piece, but you put your being into it, you give it your soul, and you share it as a group? Thank you again, Quartet San Francisco. You're going to enjoy the piece that they play at the end as well. Now, I'm very lucky to be joined by someone that I feel fortunate enough to call a new friend, but someone that represents in space and architecture what I believe we just heard. When you go beyond what's just written, beyond the requirements, into greatness. Please welcome my friend Bill McDonough. Thank you. You're welcome. So, Bill, thank you for being here.
Privilege.
Bill and I've had the opportunity to get to know him recently as we've discussed different things related to LEED and all the work that he does. And I feel like I've been going to school in these conversations. I learn from him every time I talk to him, so here I go. Bill, one of the reasons I do the work I do is because I first heard you mention a building in Ohio where you were talking about the building creating more energy than it used and the water coming out of it being cleaner than the water going in. To me, those were the greatest visions of performance that I've ever heard, and I'm wondering, where did you come up with that?
I looked at a tree. Toyota recently had an ad that has a tree in it, and it says above it, "Our goal, 0 emissions." That is the saddest piece of bad science I've ever seen. Trees emit oxygen, we hope, right? Birds, flowers, beauty. So I just remember thinking that if I was looking at a fire burning in my fireplace in college, and I was thinking about entropy because I was taking physics. I was trying to figure out why Hiroshima disappeared, because I had seen that as a child. And as I looked at E equals mc squared, I realized that if c is the only number and it's bigger than I can imagine, and I square it, then it's almost infinitely big, which means that if m is a positive number, as in 1 hydrogen atom, then E is almost infinitely big, and that's why Hiroshima disappeared. That's the atom bomb. And that really, if you have the entropy of a log burning and you wonder what is the opposite of that, you won't find it in physics. That was the part that amazed me. I was looking at all the combustion and the gases and the minerals and the smoke, and I was thinking, what is negative entropy? I'm from Asia. What's the opposite? And I couldn't find it in the library in physics. I couldn't find negative entropy. And the reason I couldn't find it, I got home and I looked at the log burning and I went, it's the log, stupid. And then I realized it was a tree as a dispersed collector of entropic photons from the sun. And that it was aggregating carbon out of the atmosphere and putting it in soil and emitting oxygen and purifying water and building soil and providing habitat for hundreds of species and changing colors with the seasons and creating microclimates. And I thought, if I'm ever an architect, I'm going to design buildings like trees.
So did nature ever set out performance indicators, do you believe? Or is that where intention comes in?
Making oxygen. I'm doing a building now where I'm about to make oxygen. Very excited about it. We have a wall inside the building I call O2, the wall. I'm very excited about that. I don't know. I mean, this is our world. This is what we were evolved to live in. Why wouldn't we do that? And this isn't about efficiency either. You know, Michael Braungart and I like to talk about cherry trees. You know, they're not efficient. You know, you don't look at them and say, how many blossoms does it take? You know, you might get 2 more cherry trees out of it, you know, and all this work. But it's delightful, and we love cherry trees, and they go back to soil, and we love that. It's beautiful. See, efficiency is not a good. It's just a tool. If you're a terrorist and you're efficient, you're worse, you see? But if you do the wrong thing perfectly, you're perfectly wrong.
Yeah, but let me ask you about this, because I've always loved your metaphor of if you're heading in the wrong direction very fast, you know, you're never going to get to the right place, so you have to turn around. But then I've always thought, well, you at least have to slow down before you get there to turn in the other direction.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that what efficiency can represent?
Definitely. It's really valuable. It's just insufficient.
Right.
See, because you haven't changed. It's like when we look at companies and countries reporting their carbon, and they'll say, oh, you know, we want to be 20% less carbon by 2020 or something. So what you're saying to somebody is what you're not. And you're saying you're going to be less bad. The problem is less and bad are not numbers. Less is a relationship. Bad is a human value. So you are, by definition, bad, just less so. Right? So if that's all you're going to tell us is what you're not, I don't think that's performance.
Right. Yeah.
I think they didn't tell us this was not, you know, whatever, the polka.
Right.
I mean, we didn't have a performance of not polka. I mean, we kind of did, but, you know. So it's, why would you tell, I mean, it's like going to a store and finding a little, you know, brown jar of goop and it says not peanut butter. Is that helpful? So I think you have to say what it is you want and where you're going, and then you can define your performance. And getting that figured out is important. So we take that chart and say, forget all this. We just flip it to where it belongs, down here, and say, we're going to reduce our badness to 0. Great. And that is good to have a 0 goal. But if you make that your main goal is 0,
Well, so help me then understand, because this, this is where we had a great conversation about this at Oberlin, where you were talking about intention, and I was saying, yeah, but I think LEED helps bring design intention to the masses. So one of the things LEED does, even though it's focusing on, it's not focusing on what you're saying, it's helping people focus on a set of rules that are way below that, but hopefully it engages them to be able to think that way.
well, I think you need a place to stand. I mean, you can see from a conference like this, it's a marvelous thing to have a safe space for so many people to engage in a question of this kind. If it does nothing more than that, convene the question. Bravo. You know, it's fine. It lets everybody in the tent, and now let's go have some fun. But I have never, in my work, of course my staff does all the time, but I've never worried about LEED ever. I didn't even think about it. We just do our work, and then we're LEED Platinum. Okay. You know.
I love that.
You know, I don't worry about it.
Yeah.
When we did Oberlin, you know, David Orr said, but can we get LEED? And the reason we couldn't, but I guess we did, I think you gave us a special dispensation, was because we built it and it made more energy than it needed to operate and purified its own water before LEED existed. That's why it wasn't LEED.
Right. And that was the building I was referring to, where you had set performance indicators that were way beyond. So
it makes it hard for people, which is fine. We had to keep working, you know. And the college had said that they would never use the auditorium and the main, you know, town hall space at the same time, and we could use the same system for both. We were also told the building would never be used in the summer. It's a college. And that building is 24/7. And so we had to, you know, constantly we had to add another ground source unit, we had to add more solar collectors because the program kept changing, but at least we held on to what we wanted, which is to convert more solar energy to electricity than we required to run the building, and we average about 13% more. At the new NASA space station we designed, see, that was fun. We had a different set of performance indicators. They asked me to work on the Mars station, and I said I couldn't do that because why are we going to the red planet when we haven't come back to the blue one yet? And if you remember Yuri Gagarin, the first person in space, and when he came back and down, they asked him, like, what was it like? You know, and what did you see? And he takes his helmet off and his eyes are like saucers and he goes, it was blue. Wow. So if you think of the planet and then going to space, And then coming back, so I said, give me the International Space Station design team. Because they say here on Earth that you don't need to be a rocket scientist to do something, but what if you were? See, there's performance, right? These dancers are highly trained. These rocket scientists are wizards. So we said, give us those people. So we had our first meeting at Houston at the Johnson Space Center where they heard the words, Houston, we have a problem. See, that was theater. That's performance. So we went in that room, we all said, Houston, we have a problem. And then we put up a picture of the International Space Station. And we said, okay, did you guys invent these photovoltaics here to power the space station? You know, is a nuclear powered space station? The reactor is 93 million miles away, it's 8 minutes and it's wireless. Is that the idea? Yep, okay, let's bring that one down. What else we got? You know, water, $80,000 to get a gallon of water up there. Can we drink our urine? Oh yeah, right, forward osmosis. Okay, you're in charge of water. Anyway, we built the thing and it's on Earth and it's the same price as a normal federal building. It can produce 120% of the energy it needs to operate. You can drink your own urine if you feel like it. I just did that for fun because the words matter. You know, no wonder Sydney and San Diego lost their ballots to see if they could reuse the sewer water because they called it the toilet to tap initiative. Whoops. Language matters. In Singapore, they called it new water. Brilliant. No problem.
So that's an example of a project. I just want to ask about cost for a second. That's a project of a project at normal federal cost, and then the Oberlin one was fairly high. Can you give us examples of how you're thinking about projects that are very low cost?
Sure. I have two going on now. And one is just, I'm really dazzled by it. We're doing a motorcycle factory in India, and when the chairman called me and asked me to work on it, I really wasn't ready to go to India because I'm doing a lot in China. And I said I'd do it, and 2 o'clock in the morning, I woke up with a drawing and sent it off to India, basically. And what I decided to do is put the structure on the outside of the building so I have no ducting or structure inside the building. So it's just a big empty shell. And the ducts are just going to be air moving to vents like I did at the Rouge. So it's a system developed by an engineer in Fremont, Ohio. And it's just this giant, big, empty thing, because the building is the duct. And why do I need more metal in there? It's in the way of my robots and monorails and stuff. And then I put the structure on the roof, and it's 15 feet tall, just these trusses, and then we're bracing them in pairs. So all my structure's up there, so it's very little steel, because I have the height. It's all outside the building. And once I have that, now I can put all the solar collectors on it, see? Because I got the structure already. And then I put the solar collectors on it, and then we're bracing them in pairs, which leaves me 46 feet of clear between them. So we decided to fill that with our skylights for the factory in the shade of the solar collectors, no glare. But then we have greenhouses on all over it. And we're doing vertical farming up there. And then we're doing our power plants are actually the wind tunnels that we're going to use to pressurize the vessel at 68 degrees Fahrenheit. And then we're making the energy in the air conditioning unit itself, and we're going to use internal combustion engines, so we can take the exhaust at the right temperature for absorption chillers, and we have guaranteed power that way, because India is a real problem with power. And instead of putting in diesel generators to back up grid power, which is a nightmare because they have 24/7, it's a 3-shift operation, so they have to have backup for the entire load. We got rid of that and just said, look, we're going to use the solar and the air conditioning to make all the energy and gas as little as necessary because we have all the solar everywhere. And then the backup is the grid. So that saves us lots of money. And then once we started to realize we could do that, then I said, well, wait a minute, why would I do cogen, which is provide heat or whatever, or trigen when I just could provide heat and cooling? What if I do quadgen? Why don't I make, let's see, how about food? Okay. How about pentagen? Let's make, how about water? If I make, there's 90 pounds of water and 1,000 cubic feet of gas. And also, I can make cooling all night because I'm running all the time, and I can suck water right out of that wet bulb temperature out in India there. I can make water all night long, and I can grow food with it in the desert, yes. So now I got water. What else can I do? How about oxygen? So we're gonna have a wall, O2, the wall inside, because we said, what's the amount of air needed by code for makeup for the 700 workers inside the building. We added probably 700 to the top of the building too. So, oh, we made jobs, that was nice. Okay, that's another input. And then let's take the fresh air requirement, which is 25% of our load, and get rid of it. Because we can have a wall watered by our water, making twice the oxygen everybody needs, so O2, the wall. So we're doing 7 things with each BTU of gas.
I like that idea.
Not very efficient. It's not just being efficient with the wrong thing, you know? It's just different. And then the other one I'm working on is now I'm designing housing for the super poor. And I had a team working on it because we were just doing this for people who have nothing. Because I figured, why not? You know? I mean, what if you could make the Grameen Bank, if Eunice could do that, or if Dr. Venkateswamy could give cataract surgery for free to 2 million people with mass production, what if we gave away housing? You know, what if we made beautiful homes that were really cheap? You know? So, and I spend time in dumps. That's, you know, I just realized the other day I'm a volatile organic compound myself. Anyway, so I went to I go to the dumps, and I was looking at the stuff, and I was saying, you know, let's take the food grade polymers and go back to food grade, HDPE, PETs, and so on. But 3 through 7, we don't, you know what we do with this stuff? If we palinize it, we basically bury baby bury or burn baby burn, you know? That's all we do with it. What if we build baby build? That's what we do, see? So what if we took these materials, we throw the batteries, get them out of there and get it cleaned up, and then we use the methane from the biogas digesters, which we should be using, all this biologically based or compostable packaging we've got here. Nightmare, nightmare. If it goes to a landfill, because then it makes methane, which we don't really capture very efficiently, and 22-time greenhouse gas. So that was a nice eco move. Oops. So those things should go straight to methane production, straight, see? And then the metals and so on. But we can take all the other stuff, the wraps that were on the packages, the miscellaneous films and all those things. We can actually build with that. So we're getting ready to do a major project to make a new building out of this stuff. But the engineers could not solve this. So I finally told everybody to go away, and I just thought about it. And it's like Einstein said, if he had an hour to solve a problem, he'd spend 59 minutes trying to figure out if he got the right question. And I finally got the right question, which was the performance question. And it was, how would I design a house that could be built by children in 1 day without tools? So that's what I did. Very exciting.
So is it like a tent? Like made out of
It's like
materials?
a tent got married to Lego and self-flashes.
Cool. I saw
Gravity
the
at
model
work,
yesterday.
yeah. It's real simple. I mean, you can't do it wrong. Piece A fits in piece B, and it's generic, so you can make any kind of cultural expression you wish. So it doesn't have a style, it just has a technique.
So let's talk a little bit more about this idea of these 50,000 LEED projects and how we get people to be thinking more at a performance level, to be thinking beyond what the requirements are, and yet recognizing what the value of those requirements are.
Well, what I found to be the most useful power in the transformation and convincing people to play at this level is money. The average thing we do saves about 20%. So the businesses get pretty interested. You have to do that. You have to honor the fact that commerce is about that. It's just that they want to also be socially fair. They also want to be ecologically intelligent. So we set the performance metrics pretty strictly, very quickly on the money. But we don't start with it. That's the important thing. We honor it, but we don't start with it. We never benchmark, ever. Benchmarking is death. Sorry, to all you people who are certifying against your benchmarks. They're important, but they're death to creativity, it seems to me. I don't think Google was benchmarking the Encyclopedia Britannica. You know what I mean? We could have twice as many entries, so that'd be good. Anyway, so I think I think we find that people, if you start with metrics, you can get to tactics, change the light bulb. You can get to strategies, change all the light bulbs. You can get to goals, 20% reduction. But you can't get to principles, and you can't get to values. See? You're still benchmarking. You can't bust through. So we always say, start with the values. So the one we start with is, how do I love all the children of all species for all time? That's our value statement. We start with that. So that's why you end up with a house that could be built by the children, etc. That's why our building in Barcelona, its decor for the lobby is butterfly hatchery with 2 glass walls, and there are butterflies hatching on these shelves all week, and then the children can come to the outside with the zookeepers and open the doors and release the ancient butterflies of Barcelona on the weekends. What a nice story, see? Why not? It's better than the ficus tree, you know? Come on. So, you know, why not? A building that restores biodiversity. That's good decoration, right? We have a decor budget. So, anyway, that's the value statement. Then we go to the principles, which are the Hanover principles for us. That's what we used. And then we set our goals. But when we did the River Rouge with Bill Ford, we never set the goal for the site cleanup at some EPA level of arsenic near the coke ovens or something. We said we will be done when the children, Bill Ford will let his children play in the dirt at the Rouge. Then we'll be done. See? That's performance, not some metric that some scientists are going to argue about dose durations. So this is human values. Then we go all the way down, and then we ended up saving them $35 million in CapEx, which with the Ford Taurus at a 4% margin out of Chicago was equivalent of walking in and offering them an order for $900 million worth of cars. It was approved in a minute and a half.
So it's like the musician, but see, I'm still seeing that the score has some kind of value because there are metrics in that score sitting right over there. It's 4 time. There are 5 lines on the staff. They're metrics and requirements, but they don't get you to values, right? And they don't get you to principles. You've got to. So I guess I keep wondering, in the world that you see, where's the value of connecting this movement of people that are starting to understand the score, but they still aren't necessarily seeing the principles and the values.
Well, there's a difference between the violinist reading a score, interpreting it, and the composer. Mm-hmm. That's the difference, you see. So I think what we're talking about has to do with improvisation as you prepare for the score. See, we will draw the building, and they will get it built. We will give them that, for sure. Right? But we're doing it together while we're designing, and it's improv. And the thing that kills improv, there are 2 things we've discovered kill improv, and everybody knows this in acting. One is the word no. If you just, somebody's on a riff and you go, no, it's over. Right? So no kills improv. So you have to say yes, but, or, oh, and we could do this, like that. One idea replaces another idea or amplifies it. The other is you can't have a revelation in the middle of it all. You can't be improvising. Imagine John Coltrane goes, and you have a revelation. Oh my God, stops improv. So, go home, relax. We'll pick this up later. So you really need to, it's a creative act, and it's very exciting when everybody gets moving together. It's very beautiful. And then in the end, they are improvising at a certain level. They each have certain license to perform with each other. We heard that at the end. I think you showed that so beautifully, or show it as, yeah. We heard that so beautifully at the end. I mean, they sounded like a high school quartet, and then they sounded like a professional quartet.
Yeah, right.
Beautiful.
But you can't teach that, I guess. I mean, you have to inspire to it, right? I mean, so how would you get? I mean, I worked on before I got involved with this, and before I heard your work, I was working on project teams in rural Pennsylvania, and they aren't inspired necessarily on a municipal project where it's completely about budget. Mm-hmm. How do you take that, your kind of inspiration to that level? Because that's what LEED does incredibly well. It gets the project team focused again around the metrics and the score and the things like that. But then how do you get them to the values piece? I mean, maybe it's just we keep listening to you.
Well, it is funny. They did a study of I remember in New York, I read it in the New York Times, below the fold, front page, and it said, 25 psychologists studied 2,500 people for 25 years, looking for changes in personality and their causes. And I was really unhappy. I read the whole article. I was really excited about it. This is, we just got a fax machine. This is pre-Google, And I called the head researcher at Stanford because they had all these characteristics of people that changed, and they were mostly caused by financial stress. That was number one cause of personality shift, and we know that. People get weird. Emotional stress was number two. Second, deep, number two. But what they hadn't done is say what didn't change. That's what I wanted to know. So I called the head researcher at Stanford, and she goes, we never asked that question. The question we were asking is what changes? I said, okay, but how many things did you look at? 187, fine. What didn't change? Well, we didn't look for that. Okay, can we look for that? So we literally put the study results on transparencies, remember those things we used to use? And stacked it up and then shined really bright lights through it to see if the light would go through, because we didn't have Excel, It was all done by hand. So and there were only 2 beacons of light that got all the way through. They were amazing. You know what they were? Friendliness and willingness to experiment with new things. So when I hire people, if they're going to be designing with me, willing to experiment with new things, and friendly. If I get curmudgeons, I'm not going to change them. I got that, right? And I need willing. Now, if I'm hiring an accountant, not willing to experiment with new things. There's plenty of room for everybody, right? But, so it's sort of like when you're getting ready to go off on a journey, you could hire a mule, and you have a 2x4, you need a 2x4, or you go get a thoroughbred, So I think we found 6 kinds of people that we work with, and 7 actually, so we catalog everybody for the role they need to play. So that you can get all the parts of the value set engaged. So you really want that rich mix of people and types. And don't put up with mules. We shoot them on site.
I wish I could do that on projects. So,
The mules, you got to remember about the mules, they're sterile and they're 1 generation.
Right.
Let them go.
Right. So, okay.
Just move on.
Okay, so I'm still struggling. Well, actually, let me move on. Let's talk some about, because I keep struggling with how do you get great ideas from people like you or other great heroes that we have in the work that we do over time or that we read about. How do we get those great ideas into the things that are more mundane? And see, I think you're very good at doing that on your projects, and we keep seeing examples of them, but we also keep not finding examples of other people doing that. And so I keep really trying to scratch my head. How do we take that thinking and try to embed it into the other stuff that we see working as well? And so that's just something.
Well, that's a great question. That becomes, let's take a look at LEED as a design problem, okay? Because that's almost what I'm hearing. What if we were designing LEED based on this kind of quirky behavior, right? In other words, how would you get values into LEED? Yeah, that's really interesting. And it might be, there could be this sort of LEED on steroids version or something, which would be, the LEED plus thing, right? Right now, when you buy products, you get, cancer. So you get product plus cancer, products plus. But what if you got health? I just designed a doorknob that will give you your mineral nutrition when you open the door, because we looked at aluminum and said, this is now associated with Alzheimer's, lest we forget. So, why would I want to open a door and lose my memory? What a silly idea. So what if we touch things, and so we call it, functional objects with beneficial surfaces. So how would you do that? So maybe in LEED, if you had like the biodiversity point, somebody said, what is that? And you said, well, if you restore, 6 native species
right
in your building,
right,
you're going to get the biodiversity point. It's like, huh?
Right.
And all of a sudden it's like, well, darn, I got to make my roof green if I'm going to restore the killdeer who are flying overhead. You're going to start looking around, like who's flying around here and what's under the ground and what kind of, you're going to start learning a little biology for a change. I think maybe it's that kind of quirky.
Yeah,
know?
okay, I love that. That's
They're
great.
just lead pokey stuff. Just
Well,
fun.
so, I mean, one of the things I feel challenged with all the time is that one of the values of LEED is that it's done by committee, and yet, of course, it's one of the biggest challenges, right?
Right.
So, so maybe we just need to
Yeah, but loving children, come on. I mean, committees have problem with that.
Right, right.
It's like on cradle-to-cradle products. If you want a biological nutrient product to be cradle-to-cradle certified, you will not have chemicals that accrue in mother's milk that are persistently toxic, bioaccumulative, and endocrine disrupting over and out. Who wants to argue with us about this? Anybody?
I have to agree with that, amen. So,
If we just give them a banned list, then they'll game it. You know, they'll come, if you put Penta something or other on there, they'll come back next year with Tetra something or other. You know, because it's not on the list. You know, they've missed the point. So you got to make the point.
so how do you? Let's talk about health for a minute. How do you think about health? Because I hear that almost everything that you're talking about is related to health one way or the other. In a way, everything you're talking about is related to performance. How do you think about health, and how does health work in nature? Because certainly things die, certainly everything isn't healthy in nature.
Oh, nature can, you know, botulism is 10,000 times more dangerous than dioxins.
Right.
It's natural.
Right.
Go,
right.
yeah. I always love the fact that natural indigo is associated with genetic mutations, mutagen. So if you go out and get your organic cotton genes with natural indigo dye, looks like God never intended you to be blue because you change your genes and you change your genes. Not good. So just because it's natural doesn't mean it's good. Nature didn't want us to be blue, apparently. But the idea that these performances become sort of exquisite opportunities for education, information, inspiration, it's just fun. And the more people you can bring to the party, the better. I think that was the thing when I was teaching at the University of Virginia. They all said, well, you're the dean and you have tenure and you can do whatever you want and you're an interdisciplinarian. Does that mean we all have to learn to be like you? And I said, look, it's very wide range of opportunity here. Engineers famously, know more and more about less and less until they know almost everything about absolutely nothing. And architects famously know less and less about more and more until we know nothing about everything. So we put the two of us together, and the contractor knows nothing about anything thanks to their contact with architects and engineers. So you got to overcome that. So you got this huge range of opportunity for exploration, and you want more and more people involved, more and more issues involved. You want a zoologist on the team. I think that might be part of the answer. Pick one other specialist that isn't part of your normal life and add their dimension to it. Mm-hmm. What if all projects started with a pedestrian engineer instead of a traffic engineer? I think it would look different, really.
What if all sessions started with a string quartet?
Yeah. No, I thought that was fabulous. Hey, I thought it was great. Yeah, really. Set the stage.
Yeah, right.
And let the mystery unfold.
So what do you consider your greatest vision?
I think the one that drives the design for me now is that it really does go back to my childhood, where I thought, and I still do, that the cities and the countryside are one organism. I think that's the thing that drives me now. See, when I look at sewage treatment, I'm very interested in this right now, because I guess it's my old age poop stories or something. But, when I was a little kid, I just thought, poop stories are everything. And in the middle of the night, we'd be lying, I was in Tokyo, and I'd be lying in my futon staring at this woodworking, Japanese joinery. And I'd be staring at it, and 2 o'clock, the farmers would come to collect their sewage, and my mother would sing us little songs about the night soil and the farmers with their honey wagons, and we would lie there in heaven, They're taking our poop to the fields. That's exciting. And, I just thought it was all one big organ, and I still do. So when I hear sewage treatment, I go, I don't believe in sewage. I don't believe in treatment. Do you know that we can now add bolt-on stuff to sewage treatment plants to make them fertilizer factories and extract the phosphate as struvite and the nitrogen and make methane. And then we give it to the farmers as slow-release fertilizer, which wipes out the non-point source pollution. And all of a sudden, the cities are making 12% money on what we used to have to spend taxpayer dollars on. Isn't that interesting? And the farmers are now getting fertilizer without having to go all the way to Morocco for phosphate, because we all need 4 grams a day. And Morocco is a long way away, okay? And isn't it beautiful that the city and the farms become one organism again? And everybody's making money. And the rivers are cleaning up. And, oh my goodness, so beautiful. So that's the kind of stuff. Can't help myself.
Okay, and there's another distinction that I made earlier that I'm just curious what you think about that. What do you think about the difference? Because I'd like to ask you, what's your favorite, or what do you think your greatest accomplishment is? But I'm wondering how you think of the difference between accomplishment and contribution, and whether or not you would distinguish those, and what is the greatest one of them if you do?
Well, I would reflect on Jefferson. As a designer, his last design was this tombstone. And on it, it says, Thomas Jefferson, author of the Declaration of American Independence, author of the Statute of Virginia for Religious Freedom, which became the Bill of Rights, and father of the University of Virginia. So there's no mention of having been president twice. So there's no record of activity, just legacy, just his designs, not his jobs. See, I think that's the right way to look at this. And when we look at the Declaration of Independence, we are Thomas Jefferson's 7th generation. That's interesting. So, you know, I would say for me, it would be the Hanover Principles 20 years ago. And that's why Stanford announced the McDonough Archive last night, is because they're going to archive this and build on Bucky Fuller's archive. And I'm going to be the first living archive at Stanford, digitally archived human. I'm recording all my meetings and my speeches, everything. It's really quite an amazing exercise. But it's really about that. It's like, what made me write those in 1991? You know, what was that? Before the Earth Summit, you know, what is it? So they're looking around, like, what are the influences? Who's involved? And then I'd say Cradle to Cradle with Michael in 2002. And the Upcycle will come out this spring, which is the lever. The lever is on the fulcrum of Cradle to Cradle. That's the rock. You know, it's a book of evocations. Like, what if I had this lever? Pop.
I actually think the Atlantic article, the next industrial revolution, was one of the most influential articles in everything that we do, because it was one of the first times that we started realizing that industry is part of the solution, or maybe not, solution isn't the right word, but really part of something that could create a better world instead of, you gave us a vision that we all, I think, bought. You know, we all went like, yeah, that's it. But how do you think that's going now? I mean,
Great.
Yeah, good, okay, I just wanted to check.
I don't know. I mean, you can only do what you can do.
Yeah, no, yeah.
I think it's great. I think the world's always perfect. But the thing is, it's like the White House, when they asked me the other day, because I'm representing the nation, as what the White House called me, America's senior sustainability citizen diplomat. Sorry. I have no portfolio whatsoever. It's very exciting. No responsibility. But they said, so what are your politics? And I said, well, I don't have left, I don't have right, I don't even have reverse. I have forward, and when I see speed bumps, it's a chance to levitate, you know, step on it. So, yeah, is it going fast enough? No, of course not. But it's important for us to get our attitude right, because designers are inherently optimistic people. And when I see, I don't see half empty glass, I don't see half full glass, I see a full glass of water and air. Science is a good thing. Water and air are both valuable things. And I never think the glass is big enough, because I'm a designer.
So let me ask you then, Bill, do you have any final words of maybe either wisdom or recommendation to the environmental movement? You know, I mean, I feel like, because we are the green building movement, but we're also representatives of the environmental movement. Or do you not even believe in categories like that?
Oh, no, I do. But I think For me, the biggest thing we have to do, as I've pointed out a lot, is I don't believe in sustainability. Because if I said, what's your relationship to your wife? And you said sustainable, I'd say, I'm sorry, that sounds awful, boring, So this isn't about maintenance. And I think that's the biggest problem we have in this movement, is everybody looks at it like, oh, I'll try and be less bad. And it's really like, oh boy, I'm never gonna, it's not that exciting and I'll try and be less bad. Sustainable, what is this? You got a mop and a broom and you're gonna go be a janitor somewhere? Silly. I think we ought to have, I like to talk about sustainable growth. Because if you look at the planet, it really is about fecundity. It's really meant to be accruing carbon in soil and growing biota. That's how it works. So I think we should talk about sustainable growth. And we should celebrate, how do you grow? That's why our buildings can make more energy than they need to operate, because we want more of them, you see? So I think that's what we need to be doing. We need to talk about fecundity, fun, butterflies, cherry blossoms. I've never met a butterfly that was worrying about efficiency. You know what I mean? Just being a butterfly. It's perfectly fine.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Bill. Thank you. So I'd like